are rating systems that test about 2,000 people a day. And on these testings, various indices and ratings of programs are based. So we decided to take one in Boston because I thought that, well, the program was very popular in Boston. And we telephoned 1,000 men. And we asked the question, what are you listening to? 994 answered, my wife. Now there's another way of testing that we have just invented, and it's been inspired. We're going to call it the Beardrex method of rating. And the system is you line up about 50 men at a bar. You put the program on at the end of the bar. If the program is interesting, naturally the men will not drink so much. So for everyone who orders a drink, 5% is subtracted from 100% and you get your rating. For example, if there are, 100 men at the bar and 10 order drinks, your rating is not very good. So we've had an experimentation made in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and this is really and truly an historical instance. It seems that in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, some time ago, this bar was lined with customers. And one man at 9 o'clock on Monday said, I want to hear Bishop Sheen. So the bartender put on Life is Worth Living. Nobody protested, everybody seemed to enjoy it. They waited until the program was over. Another week passes. Same individual comes back. He said, turn on Life is Worth Living. The bartender went to the television set and he turned the dial quickly. He says, oh, no, you don't. Do you know how much we took in last Monday night from 9 to 9:30? 10 cents. They wanted one father, the bartender wanted 3 feathers, and that was the story. Well, tonight, I'm just going to tell some simple stories tonight around the theme, best city in the world in which to be broke. One of the stagehands just now told me, he said, tell me quickly what it is I need to know. Well, first of all, I have to preface the city by this little spiritual reminder. It's a city in France, actually, the southern part, the very base of the Pyrenees. You've heard about it. It was in a movie, The Song of Bernadette. The city of Lourdes. In that particular city in the year 1858, which was very important because, 6 months in either direction of that year, our modern world, to some extent, was born. Darwin wrote his Origin of Species. Mill wrote his Essay on Liberty. Karl Marx, the founder of communism, wrote the introduction to the Critique of Political Economy. And then another world broke onto this. And there appeared to a little girl by the name of Bernadette, the Blessed Virgin at Lourdes. Well, obviously, there has to be some verification. Because if there is none, well, then what's to prevent any psychotic or dreamer coming along and saying God or an angel appeared to me? So they investigated Bernadette. She was found to be very humble. That's one of the conditions. I know one investigation that stopped very quickly when this person claimed that God had appeared to her And the investigating committee said, "Are you the saint?" And she said, "Yes, I'm the saint." That ended it. And then in addition to that, there had to be other tests made that were scientifically verifiable, such as miracles. And there is established at Lourdes the International Medical Association, which is made up of some of the very best doctors of the world. I'm not going to give you any of the verification tonight, just simply state that in 1902, Dr. Alexis Carrel went there, and he said he went there as a skeptic. And after studying the miracles, he was absolutely convinced that they took place. And then with this further remark, we'll go into the stories about being broke. You see, if Christ is not the Son of God, which is untrue, but if Christ is not the Son of God, then the story of the mother of Christ appearing in this world would be just as ridiculous as the mother of Buddha or Confucius appearing. But if he is the Son of God, then she could just as well appear to intercede for a miracle, to intercede for us, just as she did at Cana. And those who accept the background of Lourdes, well, they have two mothers, like I have two mothers. I have a mother in the flesh, and then I have her as a spiritual mother, because our blessed Lord gave her to us all on the cross when he said, "Behold thy mother." I read Mass once a week to her. When I was a little baby, my mother placed me on the altar of the Blessed Mother and dedicated me to her. So I've dedicated all of my books to her. Everything that has been written my whole life. Well, I love the place, and not just that place, but let me tell you that it's a good city in which to be broke. Now, you can be broke financially, you can be broke spiritually, you can be broke physically. Physically broken, you might be cared for by a miracle. I'm not going to discuss those. But financially broke, that will interest many of you. I have already told you that I was in school until I was 29. That's how dumb I was. And I was doing university work at the University of Louvain in Belgium, and I wished to celebrate the 5th anniversary of my ordination as a priest, and I thought the best way to celebrate it was to go to Lourdes, which is about 16 or 18 hours away from Louvain in Belgium, all the way down almost to the border of Spain. Well, I had just enough money to go to Lourdes, but not enough to live on once I arrived. I asked my brother, who was studying medicine at the University of Louvain, if he had any money. And he was a typical university student, too. So I said, well, if I have faith enough to go down to Lourdes to celebrate the 5th anniversary of my ordination, it's up to the Blessed Mother to get me out. So I arrived in Lourdes broke. I then decided that if she was going to pay my hotel bill, she could just as well pay a big one as a little one. When you're asking for miracles, never be a piker. Well, no drinks sold so far in Wilkes-Barre. We've just received a telegram. He was a lone drinker. They took in only a dime. You notice that? Well, the first-class hotel in Lourdes would be 4th class here in New York City. But at any rate, it was first class there. So I decided to make a novena of prayer, that is to say, 9 days. The 5th day, I received my bill. It was positively staggering. I had visions of French jails and gendarmes and American consuls, but I stuck it out for 4 more days. So the 9th morning came, and I was very hopeful. I went down to the grotto, nothing happened. Noon, nothing happened. Evening, nothing happened. Then it was serious. So I decided to give the Blessed Mother another chance. So I went down to the grotto about 10 or half past 10 that night, and as I was kneeling there, a portly gentleman tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, "Are you an American priest?" "Yes." "Do you speak French?" "Yes." "Do you know Paris?" "Yes." "Well," he said, "this is my wife, my son, my daughter. We're going to Paris tomorrow. We want you to come with us to Paris and talk French for us and show us about the city." So he walked me back to the hotel, and then he asked me a very interesting question. He said, "Have you paid your hotel bill?" So was I glad I hadn't paid it. So I out-fumbled him for the bill. One of those not too rare moments in life when the grasp does not exceed the reach. So I went to Paris with him and stayed a week, and at the end of the week he said, do you mind taking my address at the bottom of a check? You can visit us when you return to New York. And I said, "Well, no, not particularly." So I arrived back in Louvain with much more than I started with. And that family and I went back to Lourdes 3 times together to thank Our Lady for introducing us one to another. Now, the moral is not to go to the Waldorf and run up a bill. But it works in Lourdes, and so I found it was a very good city in which to be broke. And not only to be broke physically, I mean financially, but also to be broke financially and spiritually, rather. And this happened on another occasion. I've been to Lourdes 26 times. And this particular time, I wanted a spiritual favor. Would not have profited me in the least. And when I left, it was not forthcoming. So I was making my Thanksgiving after Mass. It was my last day. And I was talking to the Blessed Mother, and this is what I was saying to her. I said, "Now listen, I have come over 3,000 miles here to visit you, and I asked for a spiritual favor. Didn't mean anything to me, and you refused to grant it. Now you can keep it. I don't want it." I said, "If you ask me for something, I do give you anything you wanted. Why don't you give something to me?" "I'm mad at you." Now I said, "It's all right for me to be mad at you, but I don't want you to be mad at me. So I'm going to give you a chance to prove that you're not mad at me." So I said, "I'm going down to the grotto, take a drink of the water, and then I'm going to leave the grounds. And before I leave the grounds, I want you to send me a little girl, age 12, dressed in white, who will hand me a white rose. And I shall take that as a sign that you're at least not mad at me." I knew she had 1,000 reasons to be mad at me, but I didn't want her to be. So I was about 75 feet from the gate. I didn't see anybody there. And I said, "Well, you better hurry. You haven't much time." So I got to the gate, and right behind it was a little girl, age 12, dressed in white, and she handed me a white rose. I suppose that's why I'm talking about her tonight. It reminded me of a line of Chesterton's, that her son climbed up her body as a tower of ivory and kissed upon her lips a mystic rose. And that's what she gave me. Then one other experience has to do with being spiritually broke for I was broken in this instance. I had been there about 7 or 8 days, and the train left for Paris at 8 o'clock in the evening. And I went down to the grotto about 7, just to say a little farewell. And I ended up with this little prayer. I said, I want you to send me some trouble, some inconvenience, something that will be very hard for me, and because of it, somebody else will be helped very, very much. Now let me tell you, that's one prayer that's always answered. That never fails. Because sometimes, you know, when we're young, our mothers give us bitter medicine, and they say it's, well, for your own good. Sometimes the bitter medicine, too, can be for other people's good. And she gives bitter medicine from time to time. I can remember over a period of a couple of years that I seemed to get every hard cross always on her feast day. Never it was. But so after making that prayer, I hurried back to the best hotel in Lourdes. I always stay there since. And I ran up, as is my wont. I ran up the stairs 2 flights at a time. First flight, I got the impression somebody was following me. Second flight, somebody following me. Third flight, ran down the corridor, somebody was after me. Turned around. There was a young woman there from Holland. I said, are you following me? She said, yes. I said, why? She said, I don't know. She said, I saw you in procession this afternoon, and I just decided that I wanted to talk to you. I said, anything I can do for you? She said, no, I'm an atheist. I said, oh, no, you're not an atheist. You wouldn't be here if you were an atheist. I said, you probably lost the faith, and she said, yes. I said, you're my trouble. So I canceled my trip back to Paris. And I stayed on for 3 days until finally she was at peace with herself and the good Lord. And up to this time, I had no difficulty. And I started back to Paris. 50 miles, and it was 8 or 9 hours to Paris. 50 miles, the conductor put me off. He said, your ticket is no good. It's 3 days old. Waited for another train, bought another ticket. Got on a train, no water to drink, no food. It took me 2 days to get 2 days and 2 nights to get to Paris, during which time I had neither food nor drink. I had plenty of trouble. But it helped someone. And then this very interesting story. At the close of the last century, there was married in Paris a good, ordinarily good girl by the name of Elizabeth Arrighi to a French doctor who was in the government service, Felix Le Sueur. And he promised to respect the faith of his wife, but he spent almost as much time propagating atheism and anti-clericalism as he did practicing medicine. As a matter of fact, he was editor of one of the anti-clerical newspapers in Paris. And he forgot the promise that he made to his wife and tried to break down her faith. And he was succeeding fairly well. But he worked a little bit too fast. When he put a certain book of an arch scoffer into her hands, she reacted. She decided to study her faith. Now, she was a learned woman. She could speak, besides her native language of French, she could speak English, German, Italian, Spanish, Russian, Latin, and knew some Greek. She also knew some Greek. And she built a library in her side of the house, conspicuous with the great classical thinkers like Aquinas and Bonaventure. And then in 1905, she was taken ill. And she tossed on a bed of constant pain from 1905 until 1914, May 3rd. And as she was dying, she said to her husband, "Felix, when I am dead, you will become a Dominican priest." He said, "Elizabeth, you know my sentiments. I've sworn hatred of God and religion. I shall live in that hatred, and I shall die in it." She repeated her words and passed away. Rummaging through her papers, he found her last will and testament. And it read, "I will to you the most precious thing that any wife can will a husband. I will to you 9 years of suffering." In 1905, I asked Almighty God to send me sufficient pains and sufferings to purchase your soul. Prayer alone was not enough. And on the day that I die, you will have been bought and paid for. Greater love than this no woman hath, that she should lay down her life for her husband. He dismissed it as the fancies of a pious woman, but inasmuch as he was very devoted to her, and to forget his sorrows, he took an automobile trip in the southern part of France with an atheistic friend of his. And they made the same trip that he and his wife had made during their honeymoon. Just for sentimental reasons, he stopped in front of a little church into which he had gone to visit during the honeymoon. And he almost seemed to hear his wife speaking to him, saying, "Go to Lourdes." Well, he had been to Lourdes, he had written about it, he had proven that Lourdes was a fraud and a superstition. So he dismissed the thought. And then in August 1914 came the World War. Dr. Lasser was charged by the French government to take important documents to Bordeaux. And seated on the box of documents in the long corridor of the French train, for the second time the message, seemingly from his wife, "Go to Lourdes, go to Lourdes." He compromised and went to Paris-le-Monial. Third time the message, and he went to Lourdes. Rank unbeliever. Standing before the statue of Our Lady, suddenly he received the gift of faith. So total and complete was it that he had not to go through any process of juxtaposition and say, "Well, now that I believe, how will I answer this difficulty, or how will I answer that difficulty?" He saw all of error in its stupidity, naked stupidity. Well, the years they've been written for abnormal people. How would you like to hear a little psychology for normal people like yourselves? There are 10,000 people that are running toward an abyss, and one man runs from it. He seems to the others to be in flight. And when indeed there are so many abnormalities, it behooves us to recall that there is really a psychology for normal people. And we will try to explain it tonight in this lecture, first of all, by showing the difference between knowing and loving, and then showing the difference in knowing and loving between man and woman. First of all, our soul has two faculties. One faculty is the faculty of knowing. The other is the faculty of loving. We are like an animal inasmuch as we have sensations and passions, but this is something which is specifically human. Knowing belongs to man's intellect or reason. Loving belongs to our will. The object of the intellect is truth. The object of the will is goodness or love. Now, they both operate in quite a different fashion. This is how our intellect operates. Whenever our intellect knows anything, it always brings it down to the level of our intellect. Suppose, for example, a teacher, there must be many teachers listening, they often have the experience of explaining some abstract principle to children. They always have to do that in concrete terms. If the child is to know and understand, the principle must be brought down to the level of the child's intellect. That is why sometimes when we want to memorize something, we make an association in our intellect with something that we know. I remember once I was to meet a man with the name of Lummick, and someone in my office said, "Now, try to remember that name, because I'm very poor at remembering names." And the secretary said, "Now, just remember that his name rhymes with stomach." Do you know what I called him? Kelly. You take something very simple that is known. Take a flower in a crannied wall. Well, you bring that up into an intellect like Tennyson's, and it comes out as a poem. A flower in the crannied wall, if I knew what you are, root and all, I should know what God and man is. So the object of the intellect is in itself. Now notice the difference with the will. The will always goes out to meet the object that it loves. If, for example, you love music, you have to meet the demands of music. If you study a foreign language, you have to go out to meet the demands of that language. If, for example, a young man is courting a woman and she loves poetry, well, he's very foolish if he tries to quote mathematics to her. Now, there is a profound difference between knowing and loving from this point of view also. My little angel is cleaning the backboard. I had a little conference with him beforehand. He said that he was going to do everything very, very quick tonight because I was talking about spiritual faculties. Here is another law of the intellect or reason. Whenever the mind knows anything that is below it, it elevates that thing by knowing it. Whenever it knows anything that is above it in dignity, it to some extent degrades it. Now let us take, for example, the knowledge of a scientist. A scientist gives us physics, biology, or our mind, as we know the birds and the flowers and the trees, draws all of these things into itself, and the mind gives them a new kind of existence, a new kind of being. We spiritualize the whole lower universe. That was the reason that wise old Aristotle said that the mind of man is a microcosmos, a little universe containing the whole world within itself, and as it knows things that are below it, it ennobles them. That is the basis of the Jewish hymns of praise. For example, the Psalms of David and the Benedicite, the three youths in the fiery furnace. God is praised for the clouds, the sky, the oceans, the mountains, and everything in the universe. This is incidentally the nobility of human knowledge. The fact that it spiritualizes everything that is below the mind. Now, when you come to something that is above the mind in dignity, oh, then it's degraded because we have to pull it down to our level. For example, you are listening. What does my angel look like? It's hard to picture an angel. My angel has a 21-inch wing spread. You try to bring the knowledge of God down to your intellect. It's almost impossible. That is why we have to, in the natural order, negate many things about earth in order to know God. Incidentally, that was one of the fine insights of the play, was it not, Green Pastures? Where God appeared as just a common figure on the stage. No attempt to approximate deity. It's always good theater, therefore, in a movie, for example, not to show the person of Christ, because one would miss his divinity by making him purely human. Now, we come to the will. And here, the operation is just the contrary, because we said the will always draws everything to itself. When the will loves anything that is below it, it degrades itself. Take, for example, suppose the primary love of man was money. Man would become like gold, cold and hard and yellow. Suppose it's carnality, just living for the pleasures of the flesh alone. Man degrades himself because we always become like that which we love. A man loves alcohol, he becomes an alcoholic. Degrades himself, pulls himself down by loving that which is beneath him. If a man loves something that is above him, then he becomes a noble. That is why it is important for youth, and for everyone, in fact, to have the right kind of ideals and the right kind of heroes, because we tend to imitate them. Whom do we love? A player of a percussion instrument? Is he an ideal? A moaner? A soldier? A patriot? A saint? You can readily see, the higher the love, the more human dignity is lifted up. That is why, to a great extent, the level of any civilization is the level of its womanhood. Because when man loves a woman, he has to be worthy of her. The higher she is in virtue, in nobility of character, truth and justice and goodness, the more a man has to aspire to be worthy of her. History of civilizations could actually be written in terms of the level of womanhood. Now, this is the difference between knowing and loving, and this helps answer a riddle, or not a riddle, but a question sometimes people ask. Why is it that very learned people are not religious? Now, that question must not point to the fact that people who are religious are not intellectual. But we must remember that the intellect and the will operate in different ways. The intellect draws something to itself, and the will always goes out to that which it loves. Now, take, for example, a chief of police. Does a chief of police know anything about robbery? He certainly has a fine knowledge of robbery. He knows how to get into banks. He knows how to break into houses. Probably the chief of police has most of the burglar's tools. But does he ever rob? No, he does not love robbery. See, there's no intrinsic connection between the two. Take, for example, a train announcer. Does a train announcer know where the train goes? Yes. Does he ever go there? No. And so it's possible, as you see, for people to know something about any particular science or art and still not love. Thomas Aquinas said, the least love of God is worth more than the knowledge of all created things. This has been a very abstract lesson so far, and I hope now that we can make it a little concrete. And it will be a little more concrete if we tell you that now we're going to be concerned with the difference between a man and a woman in knowing and in loving. I hope that I start no disputes in families this evening. The first difference between a man and a woman is that a man is concerned principally with things and a woman with persons. That's the first difference. Hence, a man is much more interested in business than a woman. A man's interest is much more remote. A woman's interest is more immediate. A man's interest is the abstract. A woman's is more concrete and intimate. A man is concerned with ends and goals and purposes. A woman is more concerned with something that is very proximate and close and near and dear to her. And because a woman is more interested in persons, a woman is much more inclined to gossip. That is not necessarily a fault any more than talking about business. Ever notice, hear a conversation of men on a train? Almost always business. As for gossip, the woman doesn't need to believe everything she hears, but at least she believes she can repeat it. And it is this that causes sometimes misunderstandings. For example, a man will come home from the office full of business, and he will say, listen, dear, today I got an order for 250,000 nuts and bolts. We were the only factory that was able to supply those in Greater Manhattan. You know what his wife will say? Dear, how do you want your eggs? And then the other way around. Man is reading the newspaper. Woman comes in, the wife comes in and says, notice anything new? Why is it, after thousands of years of civilization, husbands have never been able to pick out hairdos and new hats? Now, though there is this difference, understand they complement one another, and very beautifully. After all, this is the future, and this is the present, and both are needed to make a happy family. A second difference between the love of a man and the love of a woman is that a man will always give reasons for loving. A woman gives no reasons for loving. I must be right on this one. For example, a man will say, oh, you're beautiful, I love you because your teeth are pearly. And a woman just says, I love you. Her heart is autonomous. Man's reason is always mixed up, his love is always mixed up with his reason. Men generally write the love songs. That's why I love you. You're the cream in my coffee. You're the salt in my stew. You're my Bendel bonnet, you're my Shakespeare sonnet, you're my Mickey Mouse. They're not very good reasons for loving, but at least there they are. And I'll ask my angel not to erase that in order that we can follow the three reasons. A woman never tells you why she loves, she just tells you how. Take, for example, this beautiful poem of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I'm sure you're familiar with it. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach, and feeling out of sight for the ends of being an ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need, by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely, as men strive for right. I love thee purely, as they turn from praise. I love thee with a passion put to use in my old griefs, and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with a breath, smiles, tears of all my life. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. This also explains why, in a dispute between the two, a man will resort to logic and the woman will resort to tears. A third difference is that defects mar a man's love. Defects do not hurt a woman's love. A man hears somebody talk about